Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. You know, ahead of this Trump CNN town hall event, we were covering all the leftoids suffering a collective meltdown like they usually do. For the most part, we understand why. Opinions are very dangerous to the mental well-being of a modern neo-Marxist on Twitter. But for the establishment folks out there, clearly it was something else. They didn't want Trump to get a platform because of their precious globalist narratives. I'm thankful that the globalist establishment is melting down, because that probably means that Donald Trump is hitting some hard truths. For me, frankly, it boiled down to one single statement. You could even argue one sentence. You can talk about whatever issue you want, abortion this, abortion that. At the end of the day, I don't care about any of it. This right over here is all I needed to hear. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Trump is supposed to be the unhinged psychopath. Donald Trump back in 2016 was gonna start World War III. He can't be trusted with the nuclear codes, nuclear codes. But honestly, at this point, I think he's the only one who can be trusted to make the right decisions so we can avoid global chaos and war.
The question is, would you give Ukraine weapons
I was
and
impeached
funding?
by a crazy woman named Nancy Pelosi.
But the question here is, would you give Ukraine weapons and funding if you were elected?
I would sit down. Let me just put it a nicer way. If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in one day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over. It'll be absolutely over.
Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I don't think in terms of winning and losing. I think in terms of getting it settled so we stop killing all these people and breaking down this country. Now,
follow up on that. You said you don't think in terms of winning and losing. Mr. President, can I just follow up on that because that's a really important statement that you just made there. Can you say if you want Ukraine or Russia to win this war?
I want everybody to stop dying. They're dying. Russians and Ukrainians. I want them to stop dying. And I'll have that done. I'll have that done in 24 hours. I'll have it done. You need the power of the presidency to do it.
Now, you can see how narrative-driven CNN is. I mean, what a despicable question to ask. So you're saying that you don't want Ukraine to win? You don't support the current thing? No, because he's not a brainwashed fool falling for the military-industrial complex propaganda. He's able to think for himself. It's crazy how that shifted. How the same liberals from the past however many decades, who historically have always been on the side of protesting needless wars and conflict, all of a sudden are the biggest warhawks, the biggest warmongers. It's crazy how that brainwash and propaganda has seeped its way so deeply into their skulls that they mindlessly just support the thing. What you are supporting is not only a continued risk of nuclear apocalypse, it's not just the money laundering, it's the lives themselves. The compassionate left. They care so much about human life when it's someone like Jordan Neely or George Floyd. When it comes to people dying in Chicago, there's no empathy, there's no compassion. When it comes to people dying in Ukraine, well then there's certainly no compassion. For them it's justified because it supports the current thing. Let's really put it into perspective. We have this article from Reuters, Ukraine war, already with up to 354,000 casualties, likely to last past 2023 US documents. As many as 340,000 Russians and Ukrainian soldiers have been killed or injured in the Ukrainian war, which is grinding towards a protracted conflict that may last well beyond 2023, according to a trove of purported US intelligence documents posted online. If authentic, the documents, which look like secret US assessments of the war as well as some US espionage against allies, offer rare insight into Washington's view of one of Europe's most deadly conflicts since World War II. I mean, from my point of view, when assessing a war like this or assessing any type of conflict, there's a whole lot of context, nuance, especially if you're analyzing it from a third-party perspective, yet the establishment doesn't want you to think beyond Ukraine good, must win, Russia bad, must lose. And anything to achieve that goal is justified. I simply cannot and will not agree with that. The idea of nearly 400,000 people perishing in this needless conflict cannot and should not be justified. I've been saying the same thing for a year. It's time to get into diplomatic peace talks. Yet nobody wants to have that conversation, very simply because war is too profitable. It's too profitable for major arms producers, all the top defense contractors posting record profits, and it's certainly too profitable for all the politicians funneling Western taxpayer dollars, mostly American taxpayer dollars, straight into their own pockets. Here Here's another beautiful headline. Zelensky embezzled $400 million allocated by the US for purchasing fuel. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky embezzled hundreds of millions of dollars that the US allocated for the purchasing of fuel, according to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersh, citing sources claim that the Ukrainian president and many in his entourage have been skimming untold millions from the American dollars earmarked for diesel fuel payments. One estimate by analysts from the Central Intelligence Agency put the embezzlement funds at $400 million last year. Corruption in Kyiv is approaching that of the Afghan war, although there will be no professional audit reports emerging from Ukraine, the website claimed, blaming U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan for the situation. Those are certainly two names that I am not surprised to see in the same sentence as corruption and embezzlement of funds through Ukraine, and so the approved establishment stance is that you shall ask no questions. It's a battle between good and evil. It's a battle that the U.S. should be fighting for some reason with taxpayer dollars. And eventually, based on what we've heard from some of these warmongering hacks in Congress and in the Senate, Ukraine must win at any and all cost. We will do, quote, everything it takes. Even if that means American boots on the ground, Ukraine must win. You are not allowed to question that narrative, but anybody approaching this topic seriously and understanding the dynamic here knows that it's yet again another useless globalist conflict, probably over natural resources or some other corrupt financial priority. Well, speaking of priorities, the only priority that I have, and I think that many others have, I think what most people want to hear, the top priority should be an end to the conflict. A diplomatic end, and a normalization of these kinds of peace talks, and hopefully a normalization of relationships between nations. Not every nation is perfect. In fact, none of them are. And the idea that the United States should be the world police fighting these conflicts to overthrow governments abroad is something that I think most people do not support. And even if they did, if they were properly educated on the facts, I think they'd see the light fairly quickly. Not to mention, these days, the United States government seems to be losing its righteous stance on the global stage. Look at all the corruption we've uncovered with the FBI and the CIA. Just as of recently, the idea that the US government should be lecturing anyone on corruption is frankly laughable. And so look, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I'm certainly going to speak for myself. The first thing that I want to hear come out of a president's mouth is we will put an end to the conflict. We will stop fighting these useless wars. We will focus on peace as the end result, and we will get there through diplomatic means. How many more people must suffer? How many more riches should be plundered from the American taxpayer coffers? How many more times will young American lives be sent overseas to fight these ridiculous battles only to come back home bruised, beaten, missing eyes, missing limbs, suffering psychological trauma for a lifetime? How many more lives need to be needlessly sacrificed? The answer from my perspective is none. We're not facing an existential crisis like back in World War II. That conflict was certainly justified. These modern day conflicts are arbitrary, made up, and they are instigated for the sole purpose of enriching the elite class. That's my perspective, and I'm sticking to it. And that alone is why Donald Trump, in my opinion, should be president of the United States. It's no coincidence that during his first term, his 4 years in office, not a single new war was started, and peace was being achieved diplomatically across the globe. It is certainly no surprise. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Of course, you know that we'd love to have you here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.